Hey, I just wanted to check back in with some more thoughts and reflections. Um, Many of us are very aware, obviously, by this point, of the various um, peaceful protests, demonstrations, and unrest all over our country. 150 cities plus, almost every state has cities where people are protesting and demonstrating. And um, I've been super encouraged because when I look at the footage of those demonstrations, one thing you will see is the younger generation is standing in solidarity together. There are a lot of 20 somethings and even teenagers. And when you look at the crowds, it is a multiracial group of folks just standing in solidarity with Black Lives Matter signs and justice for George Floyd. That like they're letting their collective voice be heard. They're standing in solidarity with one another, and I think that should give us great hope. We can just kind of sense like there is this wind of change that's happening. At the same time, my heart has been broken um, with some of the violence that has happened um, at some of these protests and demonstrations, and with some of the looting and destruction that has occurred. Um, but I want to offer just some nuance into that. Um, Number one, I think we should all know, but um, oftentimes people are coming in from the outside to agitate. They're kind of infiltrating some of the peaceful demonstrations and protests and trying to stir things up. That's been happening in Oakland. They made attempts to do that in Richmond a few days ago, and some Richmond residents actually rose up together and said, we're not going to tolerate that here." And so I think there's some nuance that we need to consider in those. And certainly there's some economic opportunists who are kind of using this for gain. But I want to ask us, encourage you to press in deeper. Um, the looting, the unrest, even the protests and demonstration, right? There is deep pain simmering underneath the surface. Real pain, justified pain, due to deep rooted, um, historic, year after year injustice against people of color in America. But I think in this moment, it's against our black brothers and sisters, against black Americans. There's real pain underneath the surface. And so I likened some of the disturbances as smoke, but we need to see through because there's a real fire brewing underneath. And I think we need to take the posture of listeners. Can't dismiss this moment. This is an opportunity for us to learn. This is an opportunity for God to give us tears over not just what's happening, but what is what is the pain underneath the surface that's coming to the top. That's what I would encourage us to do in this moment, to press into that. And if there's peaceful demonstrations and protests in your city, if participate, lend your voice um, to that choir, letting our voices be heard and working for change. But I also recognize that these protests and demonstrations, they must lead to discussions. They must lead to discussions with police leaders and government leaders and city leaders around tables, and they must lead to real systemic change. And so in some ways, the protests and demonstrations are just the tip of the spear. It's just one point of the collective action. And so I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there are many Zoom calls and meetings at tables that are happening right now, coupled with the protests and demonstrations that are working towards real systemic change, that are working to hold leaders accountable and all those types of things. And so I think that's beginning to happen. So press in, listen right now. There's real pain being expressed. Um, I'll pause there for now and pick it up in the next video.